Hello and welcome to Ethical Leadership, Voices from Aotearoa, New Zealand, a podcast series commissioned by the Brian Picot Chair in Ethical Leadership, Aritahi, at Victoria University of Wellington, and produced by advisory firm Picot. This podcast series aims to demystify ethics and make ethical leadership a concept we all become more fluent in and a skill we are more nimble with. My name is Hélène Malandin, Director of Picot, and it is my pleasure to be your host for this episode of our podcast series. Today, I'm excited to be joined by John Berry. John is the co-founder and Chief Executive Officer of Pathfinder Asset Management, a leading ethical investment firm. Established in 2009, Pathfinder has grown from a small operation to managing over $600 million in client assets. Under John's leadership, the company has been a pioneer in ethical investing, becoming the first KiwiSaver provider in New Zealand to achieve B Corp certification. In recent years, Pathfinder has been recognized as the best ethical KiwiSaver provider by Mindful Money for 4 consecutive years, and the Sustainable Business Network's Transforming Aotearoa New Zealand Award. John, warm welcome to you.
Thanks, Elaine. It's great to be here.
Thank you. So, John, given your extensive career in the financial industry, I'd like to ask you a question about money to start with. How do you define money? How do you value it as a man-made concept? And is money the cause for rampant inequalities? Or is there another way we can look at it?
Thanks. Yeah, money is, if you ask an economist, they would say money is a store of value or a medium of exchange. Just makes it sound very neutral. It's just a tool for transactions, essentially, or to hold your wealth. Other people may see money as something dirty or the cause of inequality and problems in the world. An alternative view is to look at money as something positive, that it can be a tool for driving change, driving positive change. And I think with that lens is how we approach our ethical investing. Is it's not just neutral, it's a reality of the world. Yes, it can be harmful, but equally it can be a tool for driving positive change in the world through our investment decisions.
Okay, so it's really interesting to me, right? Because to your point about, there's this kind of neutral take on money. At the end of the day, it's a tool for value exchange. And most people, unfortunately, in today's world, would have some really negative feelings around money. Obviously, you're offering such a fresh take on it as money has a potential for good, and being very aware and very skilled around how to really leverage this tool in order to amplify good. So, you chose to work in the financial world, which is, deeply rooted in capitalism, if we look at it, black and white. But yet you also chose to work for common good and to build an ethical investment firm. Can you tell us about some of the experiences you've had or some of the decisive moments in your life that led you to make these decisions on the?
Yeah, suppose in some respects, it's no surprise where I've ended up. I had my father from a very young age explain to me how we can't continue to use finite resources under a perpetual growth structure, which is what capitalism is. It will lead to trouble. He always explained to me how challenges can arise from big corporations and the profit motive of large corporates and the power they can wield, and also the rampant technology and the challenges for humanity around technology. And so I originally trained as a lawyer, got into investment banking, and I suppose that one of the key moments for me was we launched Pathfinder, and in 2010 the penny suddenly dropped that how we invest actually has real world consequences, that we can choose the companies we invest in, and we can either avoid harmful behaviours or encourage positive behaviours. And the first fund we launched was a global water fund with themes around climate change, wet parts of the globe getting wetter, dry parts of the globe getting drier, and providing drinkable water for populations around the world. So, that was well over a decade ago, focusing on the positive aspect of investing. Unfortunately, we were quite early, I think, in New Zealand, and we actually found it really hard to get interest and traction in that way of thinking. It was still investing is for making money, and that this new approach is slightly crazy. But as a business, we're really focused on what we call the duality of individual wealth, of making money for our investors, and collective well-being, which is the idea that we can both make money and have a positive impact on the world. So, that was a pivotal moment, understanding the connection and the power of money. A little bit further down the track, a few years later, I'm often inspired by nature, and I read a study around the Kermadec Trench and the Mariana Trench, where the two deepest parts of the ocean. And so we're talking 10 kilometres underwater. If you got Mount Everest and put it in the water, you'd still have 2 or 3 kilometres to go to reach the bottom. So like this should be completely pristine and untouched. But what scientists found was levels of man-made toxins that were just off the scale. And I can remember the moment reading it and my head just spinning, thinking, oh my God, we're impacting the peaks of the earth through climate change and the depths of the ocean. That should be absolutely pristine, have our fingerprint all over it as well. Like no part of the planet is safe. We need to do more. And so that's when we just doubled down and went harder and not only brought in strategies avoiding harm into all our funds, but also strategies for introducing positive investment and trying to amplify good through the way we invest.
So, I mean, it sounds like, obviously, talk about ethical leadership, right? Like you had to stick to your guns a couple of times. Like you said, the first time you made these steps in an industry that wasn't really mature or ready for it. You know, you may have looked like an outsider a little bit for a while. So what happened then, you think, between you and your co-founder, maybe? Was it a moment of looking inside and looking at your values and deciding that, you know, despite the rest of the world and the industry not being ready for it, or your clients, customers, or your investors, this was the way, this was the pathway that you were going to choose, and you were going to commit to it? Was there such a time?
Yeah. So originally we had both ethically focused funds and just conventional funds. And the ethically focused funds, financial advisors were saying to me, only nutcase, tree-hugging greenies will ever invest in this. And it was really hard raising investment in the funds. But we persisted, and probably around 2015, 2016, we started to see a shift in interest and approach and started to get traction. And that was actually the point we said, right, everything we do has to be this ethical approach. We're not going to do anything else. And so we created one ethical investment policy, and all our funds had to comply with that. And that was not just a focus on what we avoid, so things like weapons, animal exploitation, but also the positive approach. And so, yes, it was initially hard, but I think we just saw this is where the world's going. We've just got to stick with it and be persistent. And we can see something. We think other people will see it as well. And thankfully we stuck at it.
That's fantastic. And paying attention as well, and seeing that there was something happening, there was a shift, and having this vision to go like, this is the place for us, and this is what the world needs. That's fantastic. Yeah. So how would you say these decisive moments you mentioned from childhood or young adult age with your father, and your early career experiences and your readings, and some people who inspired you along the way, how do you think these people, these moments, these experiences have shaped the leader that you are today? And maybe tell me about a little bit what ethical leadership means to you. So we've touched upon the work. Can we talk about yourself, and how do you manifest as an ethical leader, you think?
Yeah, I think for leadership, it's really, really important to understand yourself and understand your strengths and weaknesses and what your purpose is, and that you need that inner understanding and self-belief and belief in your purpose, because it will be hard. I talked briefly earlier around the early years were really tough in the ethical investment space, but if you have passion and belief in what you're doing, you will keep going, and you need that tenacity to keep going. And it's also important for me to surround myself with people that share that belief. So like when we're hiring at Pathfinder, one of the questions I ask in the interview is, there are so many challenges in the world, from climate change to ocean pollution to inequality. Like, what is it that makes you anxious, keeps you awake at night? What do you worry about? Some people will look blankly and say, well, this is the job interview, why are you asking me that? And other people, who are the people I want to hire, give a passionate response about what they care about. And there is no right answer. I just want to know I'm hiring people with empathy and with personal purpose and care for the planet and community. So yeah, the people and the team that we build is really important. I think consistency is really important as well. So, like at the moment, we're in a really troubled world, a polarized world. There's political pressure, particularly in the US, for companies and leaders to behave a certain way. Do you just cave in and follow whatever the trend or the pressure happens to be? Do you stand firm and say, no, this is what we stand for. We're going to continue doing what we do. And we see that in some of the companies like Mark Zuckerberg at Meta capitulated around their approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion, whereas other leaders like JP Morgan, for example, CEO there has to know this is important to us, this is meaningful, we're going to continue doing what we're doing, we're not going to shift just because the political environment has shifted. And then I suppose that then as a leader, you want to embed that in the business. And how do you embed that in the business? You create a vision and purpose in the business that the team buy into, the team help create, and you have that shared vision, and you have principles or values in the business that help shape decision making. So you're not reactive. You're not making things up as you go along. You actually have a coherent set of values that you are going to apply to key decisions and strategic decisions for the future. And finance, it's, a lot of people in finance, what are the values of your business? And they'll say integrity, client first, trust. To me, those are things you shouldn't be in. If you don't have those, you shouldn't be in business. So for me, it's a bit of a soft answer saying that integrity and trust are the key values. For me, you need to think beyond that. So, we have values like being change makers, leading boldly, thinking holistically, being good ancestors. Those are the things we talk about when we're making key decisions.
And so in the context, like you said, of today's very complex world, the geopolitical tensions, the economic risks that come with it, and therefore I would imagine like you, with the work that you do, having that increased risk, weighing on your shoulders around the decisions that you make. Are there examples recently of decisions that you've made in this context, in the last few months even, where you found yourself literally going back to these values and principles? Do you use them as a framework when you sit around the leadership table and look at this? Or is there obviously a bit of there's also the instinct in you, because ethical leadership is in your DNA and you know how to make good decisions. How do you navigate kind of the emotional, instinctive with maybe more rational framework approach, to making these decisions?
Yeah, with the business, the starting point is product, and every business focuses on their product. So for us, our product is our ethical investment funds, our KiwiSaver and our managed funds. And we have an enormous amount of ethical dilemmas and challenges in the way we invest. So we have an ethical investment policy, but not everything can be a simple rule. And so you have complexity of companies like Tesla, where you have issues in the supply chain around, so there's environmental and social issues in the supply chain. The original thesis for us investing in Tesla was the leadership in decarbonisation and electrification of transport, like not just of cars, but of all of transport. Mm-hmm. And we saw Tesla as a leader in that space and driving change in the industry. So we could balance the environmental and social and also the governance issues with Tesla against this leadership position. But more recently, that became much more challenged with the CEO, Elon Musk, being both a genius and also doing some, pretty crazy behavior, and the supply chain type issues as well weighing on it. And we thought from an ethical perspective, there were two sides to it. One is financial, and our investment team were actually saying the valuation of the company has got beyond normal financial metrics. So they were happy to sell, and also ethically, number of challenges going on. So those are kind of the discussions we've had recently. A North American company called CAE, they train civilian pilots on flying planes. They also train military pilots. And so the question was, if you won't invest in weapons, you won't invest in jet fighters, why would you invest in a company that trains the people to fly the jet fighters? So we divested there. And a question recently was another company we invest in, which actually cleans up groundwater from mining operations and fracking. And we don't invest in fracking. We don't invest in mining. Is the company that cleans up groundwater enabling that industry? That's an interesting discussion. We say it's not. We say it's actually doing something really meaningful. It's cleaning the mess up after fracking, really purposeful work. But, those are some of the interesting discussions we have at a product and investment level. So business model and how we engage in our industry is really important. We're very focused on trying to lead in the industry and drive change in the industry. And the ethical dilemma there is you're actually helping your competitors. You're actually lifting your competitors. You're helping your competitors catch up to the way you think about things, the way you do things. And in a sense, you're reducing your edge in the sense of your differentiation. But we see that as part of our mission is not just to offer ethical product and KiwiSaver for people to invest in, but also to drive change in the industry and to shift what the norms are in the industry to the next level, and so bring the industry along with us. That also drives us to be more innovative and move to the next iteration of what ethical investing looks like and what the future looks like with continual improvement, I suppose. And we're happy dragging the industry with us. But like I say, there is ethical dilemma, and is that good for your shareholders and your business? And I'd say, yes, that's part of our mission.
Wow, that's fantastic. And so is there, in terms of that thought leadership and shifting the mindsets in the industry and potentially transferring your knowledge as well as your passion to others who are competitors, do you have a strategy for this? Or is the question of having the right people around the table, like you said, and hiring the right people who have this in them as well, and everyone becomes a thought leader in their own way? Or is it embedded into your strategy? And is there resourcing and capacity to actually do that thought leadership?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. It's great to have that idea. How do you actually implement it? And I suppose that falls on me to talk to other business leaders, to talk to government, to put articles and ideas in the media, to share how we do things, and encourage people to demand that of their provider as well. And so it's planned and thoughtful in the sense that we prioritise trying to share our ideas and drive change in the industry. But so it's not reactive. It is thought about strategically. And the team enjoy that as well, because that gives us a sense of like, we're leading in this space. Let's keep leading. Let's keep improving. But let's bring the rest of the industry with us.
That's fantastic. I mean, shifting the narrative and shifting mindsets is not small feat. So congratulations on committing to this. Let's go back to some of these dilemmas that you mentioned. Like, were there times when you think in hindsight you made a bad decision? And would you be able to tell us about and give us an example? Or without an example, could you reflect on what it is that you learned from that experience?
That's a really good question, actually. The challenge in finance and the challenge with us managing people's money is we have this duality of making money for our investors and also generating collective well-being or good for community and planet. And those are often in conflict in the sense of, should you maximize profit or should you always stand by your principles? And the way we've navigated that is we can very occasionally make exceptions to our ethical policy. And we've created 3 categories where we can do that. One is transition. So we accept that a company is changing. It may currently breach our policy, but it is, and the example with, the obvious example of that for me is Contact Energy, which creates electricity in part by coal at Huntly. But they have a plan to become net zero and to do away with coal burning power. And that is a robust plan. We've spoken at both the board and executive level about that. Secondly, transformation. If a company is changing an entire industry, they may currently breach our policy, but we accept that because the work they're doing will change an entire industry for the better. And the third category, which is one that troubles me, is we choose a company because we simply can't build a proper portfolio without that. And the example in New Zealand, I think we've granted one exception, which is Fisher & Paykel Healthcare, where they breach our animal testing exception and they make sleep apnea devices. So the device they make doesn't get tested on animals, but the compounds used in it, like the silicons used in it, have been tested on animals, which breaches our policy. However, they are such a large part of the New Zealand Stock Exchange Index, the largest component of the index. Our investment team is saying we simply can't build a proper, robust portfolio for our investors without that company. We need that company. And so we grant an exception. And so for me, that's, I wouldn't say we've got it wrong. It's just for me, that is a compromise, and that is reality sort of hitting with the ethical approach we want to take. We have this duty to generate the best returns we can for investors. And, we don't invest in weapons companies. We avoid companies that mine and extract fossil fuels. So there's a whole bunch of industries we avoid, but there will be very limited circumstances where we just need a company for portfolio construction reasons.
And so it sounds to me that ethical leadership in this particular case or cases looks like transparency. Go back to your point around, shifting the narrative or being a thought leader. You need to be able to tell, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you need to be able to tell your clients and the wider public, the general public, of these choices that you have to make in order to find the balance between sound investment and common good. And the best thing you can do is probably tell the story of how potentially difficult these decisions are, but the reasons why you make them, right?
And we share on our website, for example, we have our ethical investment policy, which explains our approach. We have a register called the Companies of Concern Register, which is companies we've looked at and where concerns have been raised. And it could have been concerns our investment team or, our customers, our KiwiSaver members raise concerns about companies. And we also have what we call the Exceptions Register, which is companies that, like I mentioned, Fisher & Paykel companies, and there's a small number, but we disclose the companies that technically may breach our portfolio, but out our rules, but here is why we continue to hold them and the explanation around that. So you're right, transparency is really, really important. Like, people should understand if they're investing their money and they're investing with a values lens, exactly what those values are and the practical challenges around that.
So on the topic of ethical dilemmas, is there also, with the rapid change in, the complexity in which, your business evolve, are there moments where you had to reassess some decisions that you made from a very deep values-led and ethical point of view that for some reason needed to be reassessed in order to adapt to this changing context? And would you have an example of a decision like this, which would have been a hard decision that involved deep thinking at executive level and maybe governance level as well?
Yeah, in terms of business, things do constantly change, and you've got to try new things, you've got to innovate, and not everything works out as you planned. A really good example of that is our approach to giving. So I'm really strong on businesses should embed giving, whatever that means in the context of their business, giving or supportive communities within the business model. And it can be financial support, it can be some other form of support, but in a way that scales as the business scales, and in a way that's meaningful as opposed to just token, and also in a way that makes sense for the customers and for the staff within an organisation. So for us, when we launched our KiwiSaver, we wanted to support a family of 20 charities and essentially pay the really hard bit of funding for them, which is keeping the lights on, helping pay the staff salaries. And so we committed to giving 20% of our revenue, so our management fee, as a KiwiSaver to that family of charities. And our customers would choose which charities that money would go to within that family of 20. So done with the best of intentions. I did all the forecasting and mapping of the financials. I thought, yep, we can afford this 20%. It's ambitious. I couldn't find any examples of anyone else doing it, but let's try that. And it felt really aligned with what our mission was as a business. Unfortunately, it turns out that's a really hard thing to do as a business. If you want to charge a fair fee or an appropriate fee to your customers without loading it for that charitable giving, it turns out 20% is a lot of revenue to give away. We continued that for 4.5 years, and in that time we gave about $1.4 million to charity. But I was constantly faced with this dilemma of going to my board and my shareholders saying, I need some more money invested in the business. We're growing fast. We need more investment in the business, more staff, more infrastructure. I need more money. And after about 4 years, they said, John, you're giving a significant amount of money away to charity. We don't see examples of other businesses giving at this level. Can you rethink that model? And then the business would actually be sustainable financially itself. We transitioned that from giving 20% to charity to giving 1%, which is a sort of a global best practice, I suppose. Companies like Patagonia, a number of purposeful companies are giving at the 1% of total revenue level. And that works financially, works for our charities, but it also financially it's sustainable as a business. And you need to find that sweet spot of, we're no good to our investors and to the charities we want to support if we're not financially viable as well. So giving 20% was a significant number. It was a great initiative by us, but we were forced to wind it back to what is a realistic and long-term sustainable level.
And I'm sure it wasn't an easy decision to make, but I mean, how long has it been now, did you say?
So that was a year ago.
Okay.
Yeah, to me it was heartbreaking at the time, but it was reality colliding with your sort of your sustainability hopes and plans. And we've got to try these things. We've got to try and do business differently and see what we can make work.
Yeah, and hopefully have visibility on the difference you are making for these charities and the people they support still. And I'm sure it makes a big difference. Thank you for sharing this with us. So I think you've touched on aspects on aspects of a framework that you mentioned to me in the past that you use a lot when you think ethical leadership and what matters in terms of the very foundations of doing business for good, but also shifting the industries. I believe you've got 4 levels in this framework that I would love you to talk to us a bit more. You have mentioned the product already in this kind of investment decision that you make. You have mentioned the business model already as well. And there's also, of course, the wider industry that you are committed to influence positively. And the bigger picture is, of course, economic transformation and your dedication to system change. Do you want to put these pieces together for us and tell us about your model that seems to be driving your ethical decision?
Yeah, I sort of visualize it as walking down a mountain, and at the top of the mountain, at the peak, is the product of a business. And this is often the starting point for a business, but you need to think deeper than just product, and you can embed sustainability principles or net zero, or you can do great things with a product, but there's so much more to business and so much more impact a business can have than just products. As you walk down the mountain, the next layer is your business model. And we've chosen to certify as a B Corp because that makes us think more deeply beyond product, to think about our supply chain, to think about our interaction with communities, and to think about more broadly our purpose. And B Corp is a framework and a scoring system for helping you every year improve as a business, and to think of stakeholders beyond shareholders. Yes, shareholders are a key stakeholder, but beyond shareholders, who are your stakeholders and how can you serve them? The next layer, and we talked earlier about changing the industry. And so your business operates within an industry. How can you drive change in that industry? How can you lead that industry for better practices? How can you challenge everyone to think differently and change mindsets? And supporting, as you walk down the mountain, at the bottom, at the base, are systems, and they can be economic, political, social systems. These are largely unseen, but we forget they're man-made as well, or made by people, created by people, by laws, by social norms. So capitalism, companies, they're all legal structures that we create, and we can change those and we can shape those to work for everyone. To our investing is around people, planet, animals. How can we make capitalism work better for all of those? And part of that is changing time horizons. So not just focusing on the short term, but having a long-term focus. The longer term you focus, and as a business, you think about your place in the world, you think about your reputation as a business and what you stand for as a business. The longer your time horizon, the broader your factors you'll consider, the more community is important, and the well-being of your customers is important. Time horizon is critical, and that applies to profit as well. Like, profit is not a dirty word. That is important, that businesses make a profit, but are you just focused on short-term profit, or are you focused on long-term profit? Are you focused on all of the costs of your business in terms of the social or environmental externalities, and how do you price those? How do you make sure those are taken into account with your decision making? So, that systems level thinking and driving change at the systems level is, I'm not an expert in that space. I just encourage people to be aware of it and think about it, and think about what change they can drive, or what mindsets they can change to improve the systems we work in.
And there's something there about demystifying system change, and thinking in horizons, to your point, and the fact that actually we created the economy that we have, and it wasn't that long ago. It was only a few decades ago, which in the grand scheme of things is really nothing. And we designed it, we can redesign it, and sometimes it's just being quite practical and pragmatic about that, which I think is, rather than worry about being an expert in system change and knowing of all of the framework, actually doing what you can, which I think is a fantastic advice to future change makers and future leaders. And so on that note, John, what would you share with people who are studying ethical leadership, who've got a big dream around becoming change makers themselves? What would your advice, practical, tangible advice, be to them as they progress on their journey to being the leader they want to be?
If I was going to share three things, firstly is understand yourself and what motivates you and what your purpose is, and be really strong on what you stand for. And so that for me is your starting point, is just have really strong sense of self-awareness and self-improvement and openness to learning, curiosity. Secondly, if you have an idea or an innovative new way of doing things, you can spend a lot of time planning and thinking and talking to people and sort of visualizing how it may act on reality, but you have to start. And so before I launched Pathfinder's KiwiSaver, Rachel Brown, who's CEO of Sustainable Business Network, she gave me the best advice ever. She just said, be bold, get started. Like, she was just saying to me, you have this idea, it's completely different. Lots of people were telling me it was crazy. No one was going to invest. No one was interested in this ethical investment approach. You're wasting your time doing it. And she's saying, you've got the self-belief in it. There are people that share your view. Just get on with it, get started. And so I would say you must take practical steps to whatever it is you want to do to make those a reality. Just get started, and today's always the best day to get started. And thirdly is think about frameworks to shift mindsets or to help people understand how you're changing things. We found it really hard when we started just saying to people, your investing is really important, it has real world impacts. And it was hard for people to get their head around that. So the way we explained it was every person has the ability to make change in their community. And there are 3 ways you can do that. One is how you spend your time. So you can mentor young people. You can give time, volunteer time to a charity. Secondly, how you spend your money. So you can be a conscious consumer and you can make choices how you spend your dollar. And the third is how you invest your money. And you can invest to avoid harm, and you can invest to amplify good, to invest in renewable energy projects. We're investing in some really cool companies doing some really purposeful work. But putting it in that context and helping people understand how you spend your time, how you spend your money, how you invest your money, they are all ways we can make an impact as an individual. So think about how the change you're trying to drive, how you can explain that to people in simple terms that will bring them with you.
And again, I love this. You don't need to be an expert in system change. You don't need to be an expert in storytelling. You can just be yourself, but be conscious and aware of how important it is, to think about tomorrow, to think long term, to tell your stories, and use your own toolbox in order to do this, Start with your own treasure and your own toolbox and be very focused on being curious. And therefore, if you are curious, you will grow your toolbox as well by surrounding yourself with the right people also, right? The first point you made about know yourself, I know from personal experience that you change a lot through life, and what you may choose as a pathway, as a young graduate or young adult, you may find is no longer the pathway for you, 10 years down the line, because you mature as a person, right? So is your advice to stay aware and acutely, checking with your values and have the courage to make decisions and change the path that you may have chosen in your mid-20s? How does it look like?
Yeah. I suppose I can give a couple of examples. Like when I left university, my first job I accepted was quite exciting. It was a large company. Before I started, they got me to meet with a few of the staff, understand how they did things. And I realized there was a cultural misalignment. Like I just didn't fit in that business. What I wanted in terms of my values and how I thought about the world actually didn't fit with how they were working. So I actually resigned before my first day of work there and realized actually it's really important when you get a job to get somewhere where you feel you fit in and fits with your personal values. Like, it's quite a shock to discover that after you've started working. I'm really happy I discovered it before I started there. But so I'd say in the interview process, ask the right questions to make sure there is an alignment. And that's for you as an individual, but also for the business. The business want people who fit and align. And so ask questions around that. Also, I had some challenging times when I was working in investment banking in London. I was over there for 10 years and the work was brutal, the hours were brutal, and it was quite exciting work, but at the same time, had a sense of being owned by my work. And I learnt a lot through that time, but also probably just pushed things too far in terms of how hard I worked. And more self-awareness and better self-care for me would have been important. And so, yeah, that taught me a lot around looking after yourself, getting balance in terms of exercise, diet, mindfulness, yoga, whatever works as an individual. But looking after yourself through your career is super important. So you don't end up in a place where you feel, where you're feeling a bit crushed emotionally. And depleted, yeah. You owe it to yourself, and if you feel you're on a mission with your career or with purposeful work, you've got to look after yourself to be able to achieve and follow through on that. So, yeah, that would be that's absolutely critical. So, like, I prioritize exercise, I prioritize meditation, just things that are about me and looking after me. But I'm no good to my team. I'm no good as a leader if I'm not healthy and feeling good about life.
And so looking ahead, picking up on your point around horizons and keeping the big picture in mind, and through the lens of your work and industry, what do you think the future of ethical investment is in Aotearoa or the world? Choose your scale here, knowing the context of complexity of this world and the pressure that is on the economy, but on people as well. What may it look like in your?
Yeah, where we're at the moment is I think, a really interesting place in Aotearoa, New Zealand. The weight of money that is coming into ethical investing and sustainable investing is significant, and it's moving it has moved from the fringe to much more mainstream. I think people are understanding that connection with how important their investment decisions are for real world outcomes. There's a shift, and which is what we're trying to drive, is the shift away from just thinking about what do I not want to invest in, towards how can I invest positively and drive change in the world through the investment choices I make. So what people are not wanting to invest in, we're seeing at the moment, and I think is going to increase significantly. Two key issues. One is around weapons and weapon systems, and the other is around animal exploitation. And I think both of those will become increasingly conversation points and increasingly important for people, and for two reasons. One, we're in a very difficult geopolitical world at the moment. So that's around weapon systems, and we're also, ecological and ecosystem collapse in a lot of areas. And I think that will really frame people's thoughts around nature. Avoiding harm in those areas, I think, will be increasingly part of the conversation. And the positive investing part, I'm really excited about. In recent years, we've done 4 transactions where we can provide social housing, warm, dry housing, and still make a financial return off it. We're investing in some incredible New Zealand technology around, for example, extracting metals from e-waste, so from old computers and electronics, extracting metals out of that rather than that going to landfill. Positive companies like that. Lodestone Energy, which is we've invested in, will provide 2 to 3% of New Zealand's electricity through solar. Positive investing, of investing in infrastructure, investing in new technologies, transformational technologies. I think that's impact investing is going to be a critical shift for ethical investing to really drive positive change in the world. So it's exciting. It's exciting, and there's a lot of opportunity and a lot more awareness among people. So it's I think ethical investing has a really bright future.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And here's to ethical investing becoming the mainstream way of investing as well. With the time it takes and the energy it takes, thank you so much for all of your hard work to help, I suppose, people realize the benefit of, reconnecting with nature and reconnecting with each other. And who would have thought you can do this through ethical investing as well? Thank you so much, John. Thanks for being with us today. A fantastic conversation, and really appreciative of your time.
Thank you for including me in the podcast.
Thank you for listening. This was an episode of Ethical Leadership, Voices of Aotearoa, New Zealand, a podcast collection commissioned by the Brian Picot Chair in Ethical Leadership, Aritahi, at Victoria University of Wellington. I hope you enjoyed the episodes as much as I'm enjoying the fabulous conversations with our guest speakers. Stay tuned for more.